Did you hear me? Call to order the special meeting of the budget meeting, or special meeting, whatever. Okay, we'll do the I'll stand for the Pledge of Allegiance.
I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Okay, elections. Where's the...
So our first order of business would be to elect the chair. The motion is up on the screen. You just feel free to insert whoever's name you feel is appropriate.
Well, I would nominate Greg Harris as the chair.
Second.
Dang it. I didn't have my mic on, or I would have done it, Greg, really. I'm serious.
Okay, is there a, we just do the chair first, then move on.
You can ask if there's any other
Okay.
nominations.
Is there any other nominations? Sure. Okay, it's been moved and seconded that Greg Harris is chair again. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Thank you.
Congratulations.
Okay, election of vice chair.
I'd nominate Dave Smith again. He did a great job last year.
What was I last year, really?
Yeah, you were.
Okay, well,
You ran the second meeting, remember?
do not remember that at all.
You know? That was real.
Must have been must have been memorable.
I'll second it then.
Okay, it's been moved and seconded. Or is there any other further nominations since Dave? Okay, moved and seconded for Dave Smith as vice chair. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Congratulations, Dave. You get your gavel left. Okay. We'll turn it over to Katie for calendar events.
Perfect, thank you. Well, I want to let you know the good news is hopefully we'll only have one meeting, so you might look out and not have to do the second meeting, but you just never know. So first I want to say thank you all for being here tonight and just your willingness to be flexible with me with our last minute cancellation 2 weeks ago. And so we'll just dive right in. This meeting will probably be a little bit longer than what our first meeting typically has been in the past. However, we're hopeful that we can get through it all tonight, actually have the committee make a motion to approve this budget, and then this committee would be done for the year, all with this one meeting. So if I get going too fast, or if I use acronyms, or if I skip over anything, please feel free to let me know and stop me. I'm happy to answer questions as we go, or there will be a time at the very end for the committee to have discussion as well. So this evening, as I noted, we're going to try to get through all of our topics that we would typically do in our 2 separate meetings. We'll talk about an overview of the budget committee and then the budget process. I know that all of you have been on the budget committee before, and I appreciate you for your willingness to be back here. But we do think it's just really good to just do a general overview of the budget committee roles and the budget process for Oregon. We'll probably go through it pretty quick because everybody has heard it before, but again, feel free to let me know if you have any questions. We'll review our current year planning assumptions and where we think we're going to end this year. Then we'll talk about our board-approved budget planning parameters for next year. Then we'll start digging into the actual meat of the budget and look at proposed tax rates, and then hopefully have a motion to approve this, the proposed budget. And an opportunity for public comment as well. So the budget committee, every school district in the state is required to have a budget committee. It's made up of equal members, board and community members. So here in Hermiston, that's 14, so 7 board members, 7 community members. Everybody that is here on the budget committee, regardless of whether you are a board member or a committee member or a community member, everybody has the same rights and obligations as one another here in this committee. Board members don't have more say or less say as part of the committee process. Your job as the budget committee is to receive the budget message, the proposed budget, and to hold meetings to go through that information and then provide an opportunity for public comment. And then after that, you'll approve the budget and send it to the school board for adoption. After this committee has approved the budget, you don't have any other responsibilities until the next budget cycle next year. Our terms are staggered 3-year terms. So we have 2 people, so it's 2, 2, and then a 3. And so that as people, if they're rotating off of the budget committee and new members are coming on, we're not losing all of our historical information as that goes on. Oh, I did forget to tell you guys. I saw everybody looking. So in your binder, behind the red tab is a calendar of events, or the budget calendar for the year. So we are on the May 19th meeting. That's the only budget committee meeting at this point, and if it is approved, it'll go to the board on June 9th. The budget committee does not need to be at the June 9th meeting. You're welcome. It is a public meeting. You're welcome to be there. Board members, you do have to be there. But that should be the last of the budget events if everything goes as planned. Behind the next tab is just the budget committee members, and you'll see when terms expire. So board members, your term is, it lists your board term as your expiration date. However, obviously, if you get reelected, then that would be extended. Budget committee members, we kind of like to joke that it's a lifetime commitment once we get you on. So just ignore those end dates for now, okay? And when I email you next spring, yep. And then behind that is a copy of the actual presentation if you want to follow along and make notes. Sorry, I didn't start with that part. So we are on page 4, or that's slide 4, so page 2 of the presentation. So at these meetings, they are formal meetings. Obviously, you guys have already elected your chair and vice chair. They are public meetings that require formal minutes and have very strict posting and advertising requirements. And I will tell you that posting and advertising requirement is the reason that we canceled our last meeting. The notice was in the newspaper like it was supposed to be within the no less than 5, no more than 30 days. However, at the same time, it was supposed to be posted to our website for at least 10 days. I realized that weekend ahead of time that I had missed getting it to our website in time. So by the time we got it to the website, it was 2 days in advance, and that just wasn't enough time. So because we already had this meeting on the schedule, we thought it was best to just cancel that first meeting, move everything to this one meeting date. That's the first time that has ever happened for me. So you can bet that I'm going to make sure next year that it gets on the website. But I do thank all of you for I know that was a last minute change. So thank you all for answering the phone when I called and just hearing us out there. So thank you. So again, this was our original calendar of events. What I did, we just are moving everything that was under May 5th down to May 19th, and then we'll be able to proceed as planned elsewise. So any questions about the budget committee or process so far? So in Oregon, schools since 1990 have been funded. Basically, there is a state school fund formula, and it is $1 per student, essentially. We call it ADMW, so average daily membership weighted. So there's additional weights for special populations of higher cost learners. So for our special education students, English language learners. So there's $1 amount per ADM, and then for each additional special program that a student may be in, there's additional funding for that. So that is where the bulk of our general fund funds come from. Prior to 1990, the funds were essentially generated here locally through property taxes. Property taxes are still part of the state school fund formula. However, districts like Hermiston were kind of the winners with the state school fund formula because it takes and evens out, or strives to even out funding in the state in those higher populated, more urban areas with more rural school districts to split the funding evenly across the state. There are other funding opportunities for districts. You might have heard of a local option levy. And so for us here locally, a local option levy is not really affordable because it is subject to compression and Measure 5. So while it's out there, and you may hear other districts, especially it's really popular in Tri-City school districts, and I believe Pendleton used to, I don't know if they still do, has an option levy. However, for us, it would cost about $3 per thousand for us to generate about $900,000. So it's really not cost effective to our taxpayers and our community when we look at the cost benefit there. And then, of course, here in Hermiston, we're familiar with capital construction bonds. The thing about capital construction bonds, those can only be used for capital construction. We cannot use them to pay teachers. We can't use them for our general operations. We can only use those capital construction bonds for whatever was in the budget or the bond question that the voters approved. So no matter how much money we get through a bond in that manner, we can't use it to support the day-to-day operations. So for the current school year, 2024-25, our total adopted budget as of today is $188,908,343, and about 50% of that is made up of the general fund. So that is where most of our daily operations are in the general fund. Special revenue funds include funds like our Title I grant, our student investment account grant, anything that comes to us that has a specific purpose, or any of our federal dollars flow through those special revenue funds. You'll see the debt service fund is there at 17%. That is significantly higher than what it has been in the past, and we'll see it continue to be large for the 25-26 year. But then we're going to cut it down to about 1/3 because we have a balloon payment that's due this coming year. Oh, did I give everybody bad pens? I'm sorry. So we have a balloon payment that we've been setting funds aside in a reserve account for, and then in 25-26 we'll make that balloon payment, and then so it'll cut it down to about 1/3 of what we've been seeing the last few years. The construction bond is the remaining funds for our capital construction bonds that built Rocky Heights, Loma Vista, the high school annex. We do still have some funds remaining there that we're working on district-wide projects with. And then our PERS debt service fund there is the smallest, and that is where We've purchased bonds to help buy down our PERS rates, so our public retirement rates. So the idea with a PERS bond is that we're borrowing money at a lower cost than what it would be if we were paying the full PERS rate. So we borrowed money, gave it to PERS, they set it aside, and they're essentially buying down our rates each year. But through that, we also have to pay back the debt, and that individual fund is where that is tracked at. When we look at the revenue side of the general fund, this is where I was talking about the bulk of our funding comes from that state school fund. Here in green, it shows 63% is the state school fund, so that's actually the dollars that come from the state to the district each month. However, then you see the local taxes, the common school fund, and the county school fund. All of this area that I have highlighted in red, those are all part of the state school fund formula. So when we look at the formula essentially calculates the maximum amount for the state school fund, but then it backs out any of our local revenue that we get from taxes or those county school funds. So for the 24-25 year, the state calculated our total payment of about nearly $72 million. But they said, we told them, because we operate all year long on estimates, so we tell them what we think we're going to have, we tell them how many students we think we're going to have in our seats, and then throughout the year, there's balancing done throughout the year, and then the spring of the following year is when the true reconciliation happens. So at this point, we're telling them that we believe our local revenues, which is our property taxes and those county school funds, are going to be approximately $13.8 million. So when we take our $71.8 million and subtract 13.8, we come up with this $58.3 million are the dollars that we believe, well, we know at this point, that's the amount that we're getting from the state for this school year. Now again, they're going to reconcile it next spring, and this number could change again. And it could change, well, we've already gotten our last payment for this school year. May is the last turnover amount, but definitely in the spring of next year, they'll be reconciling and coming up with a difference. Some school districts have to pay money back. Luckily, we have not been in that situation. We try to budget very conservatively. We look at our estimates multiple times throughout the year. If we're seeing that our enrollment is trending down, or we're seeing that our tax collections are greater than what we expected, we're letting ODE know that as soon as we know, so that our estimates are as close as possible. Because the last thing we want to have to worry about this time of year is writing a check back to ODE. So you'll see as we're going through, we make some assumptions at the start of the year, but then as we get more information, those assumptions change. So as I said, our estimates can and do change. So far this year, we've received 7 state school fund estimates just for this school year. And we know that there's going to be at least 2 more come next spring when they start doing their final reconciliation. But it could be even more than 2. And it's all based on our unique population of students. And then so we give them our estimated population, and then in the spring following our second quarter ADMW, so our enrollment reports, our technology department provides enrollment reports to the state. They use that information to start trying to reconcile our payments early. And then obviously changes in economic conditions, or even if it's not something that's directly affecting Hermiston community, if things are changing at big districts like Salem or Portland, those changes could have an effect on us, because remember, there's only one pot of money And for example, if Salem or Portland gets an influx of students, so we're sharing that same pot of money, and so our per student dollar could go down, which then could have a significant impact on our state school fund payment. Any questions about the state school fund or funding for the school? All right. So as we look at expenditures, all school districts in Oregon are required to use the same accounting structure. So we have one main checking account, but we use fund accounting to help keep all of the different money separated. And ODE has what's called the Program Budgeting and Accounting Manual. We refer to it as the PBAM. And it tells us how to code every single expenditure. So our budget codes are 16-digit long. So they have a fund, a function, cost center, area of responsibility, and sub area. So most budget codes don't have a sub area, but everything is going to have a fund. It might be the general fund, or it could be one of our almost 30 special revenue funds. And then the function tells like the who is buying it or what department is buying, or so if it's instruction or office of the superintendent. So that accounting manual helps us determine, okay, I know that I need to buy pencils for first grade. How should I record that in our accounting software? And it takes us step by step to make sure that that we're following, just that general accounting principles, but then also that we can then compare districts across the state. Now, obviously, our district is not the same as, any other district in the state, but we can, if we have a comparison tool and that we can break down our expenditures to a per student cost, that just helps the state then be able to roll that information up to the federal government and their reporting requirements as well. So when we look at the expenditure side of our budget, obviously the total budget is the same. This is just the general fund expenditures. You'll see here in green our salary and benefits for the 24-25 year made up about 71% of our budget. Then 19% in accounts payable. A small amount to transfers, so those would be transfers out of the general fund into reserve funds such as the print shop or outdoor school. Those are the two areas that sometimes we have to supplement to make sure those programs continue to operate. And then the reserve fund, obviously we budget 10% of our revenues as reserves each year.
Back on that chart, where, we've always had the reserve fund around that. Well, I shouldn't say always, but since I've been around back in the day. What about the salary and benefits? Over the years, I don't remember percentages, but has 70% been about average for us? And the second question is, other districts in the state, is that consistent with the salary and benefits? Or are we higher or lower than some?
It is definitely in the range. I think that districts are seeing anywhere from 60 to 80% of their budgets are being spent on salary and benefits.
Midweight, kind of, so to speak.
Yep, and again, this is just looking at the general fund. Keep in mind, we have salary and benefits in our student investment account in Title I. So we have multiple different areas that are supporting our instructional staff and just the district in general. But the primary, and the 71% is pretty normal. We'll see when we start looking at the next year budget, that percentage is actually going to go up because our benefit costs are going up significantly this year.
But when you mentioned that there's other, salaries and not in the general fund, do all school districts required to report the same on this general fund percentages, or can they actually account some of those that are entitled that you don't show on here it could be apples to oranges to some degree based on how they do their.
It could, and mainly because there's really no set requirement of you're going to use this pot of money for salary and benefits. So in the smaller districts are going to see a higher percentage in their salary and benefits just because that's, as their funding pot gets smaller compared to ours, the percentage that salary and benefits make up is going to be greater.
What you mentioned, this district's unique to every district.
Yeah.
Unique at once. Every district's unique to itself, right?
Yeah.
How can, that seems like we're up 8.4% over the last time on salary and benefits, which sets over $6 million in one budget for that.
Yeah.
Is that some little high that you pay here?
Well, and when we get there, we can talk a little bit more about it, but our biggest driving cost for salary and benefits right now, or coming into the next year, is our PERS rates are going up 10%. And that's not 10%, like, not 10% of the rate. They're moving from 5% to 15%. So that's having a huge cost, and we'll see as we look through our budget, we had to find cost savings in accounts payable to make up for those increased benefit costs.
So it's not increased headcount.
Correct.
What's causing that? If we're getting ahead, we can wait. What's causing that increase in the PERS?
It is the continuation of PERS continuing to kind of kick that can, and
Still the tier 1, tier 2 stuff? Really?
I won't die yet.
What are they gonna?
well,
They're still living.
Okay, I wasn't gonna be that morbid, but it just seems like that.
well, and the last year was a really bad investment year, right?
I thought we were
So-
beginning to sunset some of that.
So PERS has two ways of generating funding for the PERS system, and that is employer contributions and investment earnings. And investment earnings were really poor the last 2 years, so they have to make that up on the employer side.
James, you have anything to say about this?
Remember that kickback you got a couple years ago?
Okay.
What about the next one?
I think what we're going to see on that is, as I'm PERS recipient, by the way, here too, as everyone retires in those two, the costs that we were going to end up saving, I think as wages exponentially go up, I don't think we're going to be saving much. Because the folks may be receiving less of a percentage, but that doesn't mean they won't be receiving a high dollar amount because of their highest 3 years of their wage.
And life expectancy is growing, and just all of those factors are, yeah.
It's time to push me out.
So when we built the 24-25 budget, we used these planning parameters, and you'll see that they're pretty similar to what we're using for 25-26. We're saying that we want to end no less than 10%. The board has a policy to end no less than 8% of revenues. We like to have it a target of 10. That gives us a little bit of room should something change mid-year that affects our state funding, whether that be enrollment is down lower than we expect, if state funding is down, if our tax collections isn't as high as we expect it to be. That gives us a little bit of flexibility mid-year to make sure that we can retain all of our programs, all of our staffing, and still meet that board policy of 8%. So we may not meet the 10%, but we'll meet the board policy of 8%. Now, it is our objective to always meet the 10% also, but should those changes come in that we're not able to react quickly, we would have that flexibility. We assumed that our student enrollment would be flat and with no growth. The state school fund estimate, it was the second year of the biennium, so we were pretty confident of what the total dollar allocation was there. And then the biennial reserve fund and the PERS reserve fund, we would utilize funding if needed. So I'm happy to report that as of recent, our ending fund balance is about 12%. Now, I do want to caution you, while that sounds great, that we are still deficit spending this year. So that means that our ending fund balance, we're still expecting our ending fund balance to be less than our beginning fund balance. Now, that was intentional. We know that our ending fund balance is larger than where we want to be, where our target is. So we're targeting our spending to make sure that that budget is spent down accordingly, but it is deficit spending. Our student enrollment is slightly down from where we had projected initially. However, the state school fund formula does have a stop loss built into it. So it looks at the most recent completed year and this year and uses the higher of the two enrollments to calculate our state school fund formula. So it is using last year's enrollment data to keep us whole. So it is essentially flat funding from last year to this year. And then our state school fund came in right where we had expected it to as far as the dollar per ADMW. So because of that, and because we're seeing less expenditures than what we had projected initially, we do not expect to use the biennial reserve fund or the PERS reserve fund this year, but we'll definitely be using it next year as we're planning the budget process for that. Any questions about where we are today, looking ahead to the next budget year?
I am curious, what's our per thousand tax rate that we currently have if you don't include, and does the number, that 13.875 million, that doesn't include any bond levy?
Correct, it does not.
Dollars, right? So what's the amount that we're assessing, not including bond?
4.8877 is our permanent tax rate.
0.887, okay. Thanks.
That was taking out 3 digits. 4 digits.
We need every dollar we can get.
What is the dollar per ADMW 25-26 look like versus 24-25? Trying to find that. Do the math, but
I don't have that right here, but I can look it up and we can. Yeah, I didn't break that out. I apologize, but I can look that up. So our staffing budget reflects, obviously 71% of our budget is staffing, so it doesn't leave a large amount for, kind of discretionary funds, if you will. However, we manage all of our staffing allocations at the district level, and then we provide a building budget allocation for each building, and it's based on their student enrollment. And this, in the packet, is an example of the elementary allocation for this coming year. So we look at their basic enrollment, so what we think the student enrollment will be for this coming year, and we compare it to what the student enrollment is at that time, so right now, and we did a per dollar allocation of the higher of those two numbers. So we kind of have a stop loss built in at the building fund level also, because we know we have buildings right now that are declining in enrollment. So if we look down the list, Desert View looks like they're going to be right about the same as where they were this year. However, Highland Hills will be down about 22 students. So 22 times $189, that could be a significant amount for those buildings moving forward. And we calculate the basic enrollment just by looking at every student that's in that building at that time and rolling them up to the next grade level. And then just adding in the same size of kindergarten class that school had the prior year, because we're assuming our enrollment will be flat for the coming year. Now, if we were expecting a great growth in our kindergarten class, we would make that adjustment there as well. However, for this coming year, we're just rolling up and then adding that new class of kindergartners. And in a lot of buildings, what we're seeing is the class of fifth graders that are moving on to sixth grade is larger than that incoming class of kindergartners. So as we look at 25-26 budget planning parameters, as I noted, very similar to what we had this in 24-25. We're still planning an ending fund balance of 10%. We are assuming no growth. And as we actually look at our our enrollment is going down, but what we're seeing is enrollment in our special populations like special education and ELL, those are going up. So that's helping to lessen the blow of our reduced enrollment. So they're helping to hold up our ADMW counts in our payment from the state school fund.
I feel like I ask the same question every year, and that's only because I guess the experience on board before, and Portland State did their stuff, and it shows growth and growth and growth, and we've been flat the last, 3 years now? And I think I asked the same question, but maybe I'll get a different answer. Why are we flat with enrollment, not ADMW? Or, what's your speculation, Dr. Mooney?
So I think there are a combination of factors that go into that. One is, a big one is that birth rates are down. So across the state, there aren't as many kids in K-12 as there were. When we look at each month for the board, when we look at our enrollment, we compare to like pre-COVID, and we're really kind of aligned with where we were about 10 years ago enrollment-wise. So in 2019, we kind of hit our peak, and since then our enrollment has dropped. And it has to do, one of the things that Katie said is we're graduating larger classes than the incoming kinders that are coming in.
This Portland State, prior to COVID, I guess, because that's the kind of the date we're looking, 2019, 2020, Portland State had like a 30-year success on their anticipation of growth, not just in Hermiston, but any school district community, and not even just Oregon. I mean, are they making adjustments throughout the state? Are we unique to other school districts? Like, let's take Beaverton, for example, or Salem School District.
We haven't gone back to Portland State and asked that question, but I can say when we look at K-12 across the state, that's what, there are clearly, there are pockets of districts that are seeing some growth, right? But across the state, there are less kids in K-12.
So with that said, everything looks good, right? But does the school district have concerns? I know not this year, you're looking good this year, but as we continue to go out, are there concerns that you guys have about the flat growth rate, or not necessarily as an administrator? Yeah.
Okay. Katie, we talk a lot about that. We are, as we go into the upcoming school year, absorbing some positions that we lost through attrition just because of class sizes. And I think one of the things still in Hermiston, we have really good class sizes across the spectrum K-12, but we are looking at our class sizes always to say where can we make some adjustments, obviously, because as we look at the smaller classes coming in, we want to make sure that we don't put ourselves in a spot where we have to all of the sudden right size. So we're trying to, as those classes come through, look at where we see some areas for, making reductions.
Final question, I promise I won't. When we went through all these bonds, a lot of that was projected with the Portland State. So in our district right now, especially at the elementary level, because the kinder's being low, do we have any classrooms that, like, when I say aren't being used, I know everything's being utilized, but do we have classrooms that actually aren't, a full kindergarten or first or second or third grade class?
We,
Space.
yeah, we have classrooms that we, for example, at Loma Vista and at Rocky Heights that aren't being used for a general education class that, was planned for. So we do have that. However, we still have classrooms in modulars at Desert View. Desert View wasn't built to be the size of school that it is now with classrooms in modulars. So those are our modulars that are left in the district. We still have that. We have really looked at right-sizing Highland Hills for the size that building was intended to be.
The graph that we have up is kind of a representation of the purple line is our student enrollment growth, or student enrollment. So you'll see that it was rapidly increasing, and then during COVID rapidly decreased, and then we've been on a steady decline since then. The yellow line is our teachers. Green is classified staff, and blue down at the bottom is our admin staff. So as we talk about this ever-increasing gap between our declining enrollment and our teaching staff, so about the time that COVID hit, we were actually receiving the student investment account dollars, so we were making investments in our teaching staff, and everything from classroom teachers to behavior specialists and school psychologists. So all of those special positions are included there as well. So obviously, if our budget is made up of 71% people, salary and benefits, reducing those numbers, if our enrollment continues to decline, that is really what we'll be faced with in the future. But like I said, not right now, but those hard discussions that other districts are having right now, luckily because of our ending fund balance, because of the commitment the board and this committee has made, we're okay right now. We can continue, but
It's quite a gap, though. If you look at it in the graph, that's why I asked that question.
So I got a couple questions before we move on. Dave and I had the privilege of being on the board at the beginning of that graph.
Right.
With Ms. Sherman.
do you want the graph back up?
Yeah, if you don't mind. I know, when you look at the beginning there, classroom size was certainly an issue. We discussed that quite a bit, and so, and then I know, so three parts to this question, so you have to bear with me. One, we projected flat ADMW. That line does not show, but does the purple line show true enrollment, or does it show ADMW?
This shows enrollment.
So ADMW could look potentially different than that.
Yes.
Because if you have more special needs kids or something, that decline in the purple could actually be, if you're projecting flat, those last few years could actually be straighter, right? Which would be more representative of...
They're still going to be on a decline, probably less of a decline, but remember, because the state school fund looks at the last 2 years, we're still going down, it's just not as quickly.
Okay. And then, that would be really interesting to see, actually. I think that might paint a better picture.
Yeah.
As opposed to just being straight enrollment. Because the other thing that happened during that time frame is, we withdrew out of the ESD and added personnel directly related to that at some point in this. So there is, while there's been a growth in overall staff, part of that was from withdrawing out of the ESD, correct? Is that reflected in here with some of the specialists, or how much of that is actually?
It would, but that would happen early on in this graph. Prior to 2015.
Yeah, it wasn't 19, it was like
16, somewhere there, 15, 16.
Yeah.
It's right in there. So,
Yeah.
and as that, it seemed like that population of our student body has increased. So it makes sense that our enrollment, or the staff would have to increase to meet that, right? So I'm trying to paint a better picture here than what this looks.
So,
This doesn't look as,
Greg, I think one of the things that might really help is just looking at how the metric is. So the way that we're measuring enrollment, if you look on the left side of the graph, the bottom line on this graph is 4,800 students, 4,900 students. So 49 to 59, so we're talking about 1,000 student metric on the left. But when we're talking about our funds, it's everything, it's 0 to the top across all these things. So even though you see how it's ramping up, and it looks, well, I guess what I'm saying is it looks like a wilder ride than it is.
right, and that's the point I'm trying to make.
Because of the
It's
metric.
actually, because of the metric,
Yeah.
this
And-
graph actually makes it look worse than it really is.
Yes. Yeah.
So, because there's a few things that are reflected in this, that happened during this time frame that are reflected in this graph, including ADMW and various things. So it would be interesting to put that purple line against actual ADMW and because a graph like this with continuing staff, like we just mentioned, and ADMW going, or enrollment going down as this would look, then somebody's going to ask, why do we still have?
Sure.
But on the left side of the graph, we were short classrooms at that time, and we were short teachers, or not teachers, we were short, our student-to-teacher ratio is too high. And so there's that growth in the faculty or the certified staff was actually needing to come for a while. So there's probably a happy medium there, somewhere to the
Probably
left
is.
of where this ends.
Like one of the things, like if we were to take that left side and do like 3,900 to 6,900, all of a sudden that purple line looks a lot flatter.
Right.
Than it does right here. The other thing that I think is really cool that's in our audit reports is where it shows like over time, what our average class sizes have been. And so when you throw in, hey, this is our average, this is our teacher-to-student ratio, all of a sudden, we're not, it's not like we have, 3 students to a teacher.
Mm-hmm.
We have a really strong student-teacher ratio.
Yeah.
It's good, is what I'm saying.
Yeah, agreed. And it might actually help tell the story a little better if that was in here. But
Can you remind us things in terms of certified and
So not principals, vice principals, those would be included in the blue line at the bottom. So any administrator is included in the blue line, so that's principals, vice principals, myself, district directors, superintendent, assistant superintendent. The green line is our classified staff, and that includes the teacher assistants, classroom aides, office staff, maintenance staff, yeah. And then the yellow for certified staff, that includes everything from classroom teachers to TOSAs, which are teachers on special assignment, our behavior specialists, nurses are included in there as well. And the reason for the big incline here in our classified staff, we made a change in 2021 and 22 that moved essentially nearly all of our classified staff to a full 8-hour day. So this is looking at FTE. So prior, most of our classified staff worked 7 or 7.5 hours. Most of them moved to 8-hour days. So that's where that increase came from. Any other questions on this one? Perfect. So our budget planning parameters for this year, again, very similar to what we saw last year. The dollar per ADMW currently at this for the state school fund is $11,008 for our district. So last year I had in parentheses what this equated to, and I didn't include that this year. So it is $11,008 per ADMW. So now, included in the front of your binder is a district letterhead. This is the district's official budget message. I'll give you just a few minutes to read that over, and then we can, this is our official presentation of the budget message. Has everybody had an opportunity to read it? All right. So we already talked about that. So as we look at our 25-26 budget, our total budget is what's the decimal point? $623,481. Primarily made up of our general fund at just over $97 million. And as we look at that general fund, now 75% of the budget is made up of salary and benefits. So that includes all of our expected roll-up costs as far as required salary increases or COLA increases, our steps, and then as I mentioned earlier, that very significant PERS rate increase moving from 5% for our Tier 1, Tier 2 staff members to now 15% and a similar increase for our OPSERT members as well. So we have to figure all of that in there, as well as costs for insurance, and as we know, insurance costs are going up just across the nation, really, and the district supports our staff with a monthly insurance cap, so that's all taken into account there in that budget. So behind the and I apologize, that some people it'll be yellow and some people it's orange because apparently vendors don't use the same colors on their tabs, and I didn't realize that in time. So behind the next tab after the presentation document, you will find a sheet that says fund titles and descriptions. So that is an explanation of all of our funds and what each fund is used for. Some of them we have to keep on our books because state law says that we will show the current year budget, so our proposed budget, the current year budget, and then 2 years of actuals. So if we had budgeted anything in these funds, either the current year or prior years, we have to continue to show them on our documents. Then after that time has elapsed, we'll remove them. But for this year, funds like Fund 204, which was the SR2 grant, Fund 210, 211, those are all related to COVID relief dollars. So all of those funds have been fully expended. We do not expect to receive any additional funds for the coming year. So they will still show here, but they'll show in that proposed budget of zeros for this year and the coming years as well. And feel free, if it's easier to take it out of the binder for you, you can do that, or whatever is easiest for you. We'll kind of go through the proposed budget and hit some highlights, and then if you have questions about any line items, feel free to ask and we can just have an open discussion. So some of our grants do alternate back and forth between funds. So for example, Title I, it alternates between Fund 220 and 221. Those are our federal funds for essentially literacy programs at the elementary level. So we have multiple funds that do that. So what you might see is the budget looks drastically reduced for this coming year, but then if you look at the next fund down, it would be drastically increased because we call it the carryover fund. Federal grants go from July 1 of, for example, 2024 through September 30, 2025. So our budget year stops at June 30, so we have to account for those 3 months with that same fund to keep the 2 grant years separate because while they serve all of the same purposes and the grants are used the same way, we have to be able to show how each grant year was spent. That may look funny as we go through here. So in the general fund, our revenue is increasing primarily due to just the state school fund increasing. The legislator did make a significant investment into the state school fund. Unfortunately, PERS costs are eating up most of the investments for essentially every school district in the state. Our interfund transfers, as I noted earlier, we will only use those transfers if necessary, but at this point it does look like it will be necessary that we transfer money from our reserve funds into the general fund to help support our programs and to offset namely that PERS rate. We are decreasing our beginning fund balance, so that deficit spending, we know our ending fund balance is larger than where we really want it to be, so we're spending it down over time. So you would see that on page 1 down there at the bottom near the total fund 100 under our 5400 beginning fund balance. The next tab is when the expenditures start. And then,
Is that green for everybody? or-
oh, sorry, green or yellow. It might be yellow for some. It's the last tab of your binder.
It's green, James. True, right?
I wrote, so mine is yellow, but I wrote green on it so that I would remember to say that, and then I forgot. So on the expenditure side, most of the functions are going up because of just increased salary costs. This is a function summary. I do have the full budget. It is 197 pages. I'm happy to share it with you if you would like to look it over.
Justin wants to look at it.
Yeah. But we look at summary level because it's too daunting to try to look at every single budget code. So even just PERS alone has 4 different budget codes. So that's why we roll them up in the summary level. But again, I have the details if there's something that we want to look at to say why the change. I did go through and highlight some areas of change. For example, on page 2 of the expenditures there, function 1271 remediation program, we used to code our summer school to remediation. However, our summer program really isn't remediation. It is a true summer program with learning experiences and literacy and all of those added components. So rather than using the 1271, we are actually using 1210. So 1210, 1220, and 1230, or excuse me, 1410, 1420, and 1430 are our new summer school budget codes. You'll see there in the general fund, we only have elementary school and only budgeted for $20,000 right now. We were notified this morning, actually, that we are eligible for a summer learning grant. We had initially been told, no, we were not eligible this year after we had kind of been the poster child for summer learning programs. So we were going to be funding our summer learning program through the student investment account, through general fund, through early literacy grants. So we were just going to be piecemealing our summer school program together. Not from the outside looking in, it would be our normal cohesive program, but on the backside of it, we were using multiple different funding sources. However, today we were notified that we were eligible for that grant, so it is built in now in Fund 254. Is where we'll track those summer school grants. So we may have to use some general fund dollars, but very small, we'll be utilizing those other grant dollars for that.
What, just general percentage of kids are doing, end up doing the summer program? I mean, I'm not looking for a solid number. Maybe you have it, maybe you don't, but, is it 20%?
Kids have to qualify for it, like they didn't pass 6th grade, so they have to do it.
Yeah.
Nope.
So anybody that wants to do it, my understanding.
Yes. So our current students sign up, yeah. And we have, I want to say, over 800, probably close to 900 students at the elementary level
Okay.
that participate.
That's a lot. Is the purpose that we do it, I think I know the answer, but I want to know if there's any outcomes to the answer. So obviously we want our kids to learn, maybe some of it's remediation, some of them it's just daycare. There's a lot of things, but the purpose to spend that money wouldn't necessarily be for some of that unless we were seeing good outcomes on testing results and growth, especially in the elementary. How are we tracking that? Are you seeing anything?
Yes, and if you actually, there was a video on, I don't know where the communications department put it, but because we have to assess our students and provide that information to ODE as part of the grant, but our kids, so summer slide is how we refer to what students kind of lose over the course of the summer not doing school. And we've seen increases in areas for students who attend summer program, but versus those who don't. And even in our very first year when the legislature came out with the 3 pockets of money, and we, put something together kind of last minute that was very comprehensive. Our kids have a reduction in summer slide versus students who don't attend the summer program. And part of that has to do with just being in a structured space with, language practice, right, for all of our kids, all of our students at the elementary level, and, not just at the elementary level, but need language development. So those, practicing those skills, we do have in both reading and math, our kids who attend the summer program have either less of a summer slide or growth year over year after attending.
I know this is kind of unrelated, so I don't want to stretch this out, but I'm just happy that our school district, it takes a lot more from administration to do a summer program. You could easily say, but I'm just really pleased with it and expecting the results and seeing that, not having that slide. I just hope we can continue it for years to come.
How much of the state budget, so when they give you the forecast, how much of the state budget have they given you an idea of potentially federal funds? These may or may not come through. Is there a, like today they were talking about in the reconciliation bill, totally cutting SNAP Ed, which isn't 11 billion. It's, the state of Oregon gets 9.3 million. It all goes OSU, but that, if you affect SNAP Ed, there's 93 FTE in OSU there that, could lose their job. But is that a burden that could be put on the school district for education, potentially for SNAP Ed? I don't know how that works, but is there, so in addition to that, is there a portion of federal funding that's come to this state that they say, is there a forecast that's saying, potentially watch this, or federal funds that are coming straight to the school, that you have an idea of, we may or may not lose this? I guess, how much of that is built in this budget that is uncertain?
There's a great deal of uncertainty at this point. So typically by this point, we've received one or more estimates or estimated allocations for our Title I, Title II, all of those federal funds. We have not received any of those. They're telling us to budget flat at this point. They're expecting that they're getting the allocations. Last week, we have bi-monthly meetings as business managers, and it sounded like from the federal level down to the state that they felt confident that those funds would be coming for our title programs, but we still don't know dollar amount for each district yet. So absolutely that could have a huge impact on our budget. And we're really just kind of in a hold and see until we know more at this point.
How much is that? Just a curiosity. How many dollars are at play there with the federal funds?
Well, our Title I grant alone is almost $1.4 million. And then when you start, our Title II is relatively small. Title III is about $100,000. The other large one is the IDEA for special education. That's almost $1 million as well. And both IDEA and Title I have FTE involved. So there's staffing costs that we would either have to roll into the general fund or figure out an alternative.
Thank you.
So also there on page 2 of the expenditures, 1280, that line item is going down, as is 2130. I went through every single line item of our budget and said, there's $150,000 sitting here. We put it there 2 years ago because that's where we were going to pay for the iReady program. But then we got this other pot of money, and iReady has been paid for out of this other program, so this $150 has been, or $150,000 has been sitting there. It doesn't need to sit there any longer, and I scooped it out. So I went through the budget line item by line item for that, so you'll see some of these areas like that the 1280 for alternative education. We had money set aside for our Hermiston online program, but we're changing vendors next year. We haven't been spending the full amount, and we're changing vendors next year, so I was able to reduce that budget line item on the accounts payable side. The same thing with our health services. So we partnered with Umatilla County to restart up our health center at Hermiston High School. That is a district-wide health center, but it is located at the high school. And through that partnership, initially, so our actual costs are coming in significantly less than our estimated cost because of the work of the county has been able to do to secure grant funding. So I was able to realize those savings in our budget for next year. So line item by line item, we've gone through there. So most of those changes I've highlighted and kind of made note of what those were for. So on page 3 under library and media, one of our library and media assistants at the high school, we were able to leverage our high school success funding. That is state dollars. They're paying for that FTE for that high school assistant or a library assistant.
Instructional services, right?
Yes. So improvement of instructional services is going to be things like our instructional coaches, so all of our instructional coaches, elementary, secondary, are included there. So that is primarily made up of just increasing salary costs. And actually there's some additional training cost in there as well.
One of the questions I had, and maybe it'll come up in this, are we aware of this? Are we spending more money on STEM programs every year? It's a yes or no question.
I would say yes. Just when you say spending more money, when you look at the fact that,
allocating more money.
Allocating, but also increase cost, what we can buy this year, it costs more than, or is going to cost us more next year. So, yes, we are.
I can't hear Justin.
The 2210, she said there's no additional people hired. It's like a 24% increase for the same amount of people.
So, for example, the PERS costs for that line item alone are going from about $210,000 to $370,000. The insurance costs are going from $187,000 to $269,000. So what happens is we have to budget the full amount of our insurance caps, but we do allow staff members to opt out. And when a staff member opts out, they get 55% of the cap put into an HRA VEBA. So the district gets to save 45% of that cap. So what happens is as people change in their positions, so last year we might have had somebody in one of these TOSA roles that opted out, or looking at it, probably multiple people that opted out. But then this coming year, we've had staff changes, and now we know people are moving into these budgets that are actually going to be using that full insurance cap. So that is why the significant increase there.
And that's probably the same with 2410 as well, the
office of the principal?
Yes, so Office of the Principal includes, let's see, it's not on there. So Office of the Principal obviously is the principal, but then also TOSAs, so the dean, not all TOSAs. So the Dean of Students is included there, vice principals. So we are changing at the middle school level, they're adding vice principals, TOSA, deans. Sorry, yes, deans, at the middle school level. So that is what that additional cost at the 2410 will be, is those new deans. So while our overall FTE didn't change or is going down, we're not having any added FTE, positions are changing throughout the district.
Is that line 2322, is that where we would have any of our, when it says ComRel, is that community relations? Is that any
So that is where we used to put all of our communications from the superintendent's office. However, when we created our actual our communications department, under 2630 is where you'll see the bulk of those charges now.
under informational services?
Yes, informational services is our communications department. The 2223 is now used for it's essentially one FTE and then cost associated with that
FTE
position. Yeah.
My question is, and I do see, where it's, from 2022, where that was at, 165,000, then at 238, 323, 348. I'm still asking, is for the things that we've talked about as far as improving our community relations and our external conversations with the community, is that enough? Is that enough to do that adequately? Whatever the number is, I don't know what's gone into projecting that number.
So it is essentially salary and benefits for the communications department. That's not the entire communications department, because we do use student investment account dollars also for communication related, for ongoing community engagement. So we take our roll-up costs for our personnel, and then we look at on the accounts payable side. Each department was given about 3% increase from the current year to next year. And the communication budget, as of right now, they still have funds remaining. They do.
And I guess my question is, if those are all people, where would the funds come from if the school district were to want to do something more in the community, to communicate more, to have a billboard, to, buy a blimp, whatever it is, what line item would that come from? I'm not suggesting you buy a blimp, by the way.
Is that reasonable? And it would have to come out of that line item.
It would come out of that line item?
Yeah. It could theoretically, we could use a combination of board of directors. There's a budget there, obviously, because of your big salary, right? No, there's no salary in the Board of Education. It is just essentially travel costs, but then also the Board of Education gets to pay for our liability insurance, so that's why it's so large there. So if there were a new investment that we wanted to make, obviously we have to live within the budget that we built, but we have flexibility of moving budget around. So if the board came and said, this is our priority today, figure out how to pay for it, we would, again, go through each line item, and it may be that we would have to go out to the building and say, buildings, we have to reduce building budgets, and this is why, and then take those funds and repurpose them. Now, we haven't had to do that, and we probably still wouldn't do that even if the board had an objective, just depending on what the costs were. We would be able to find it. We would be able to.
And my intention wouldn't be that the board would be buying the blimp, but I just want to make sure that the administrators have sufficient room so that they're not having to feel like, we don't have enough space in order to do some sort of communication. We've talked about various groups or individuals that we want to really celebrate to the community. We want to make sure that the community knows all the great things that are happening inside of our schools. And sometimes we do such a great job of keeping it inside of our own bubble, of making sure that we know how awesome things are. But if it just stays inside the bubble, if the community doesn't hear that, then, I mean, I think about, in terms of business, sometimes we feel like since we're the only game in town, we don't compete. And I really feel strongly that we ought to be shining. We ought to be shining brightly for our community because the school district has a lot of things to shine about. I think it would make a difference. I think it would make a difference in public image.
Absolutely.
And I think we should be making sure that we have funds sufficient to do that well, not just to, put out an email or something, but to do it well.
Absolutely. On page 4, you'll see that there are some reductions in our maintenance budgets, the 2544. So that is the line item that we've typically held in reserve for district-wide projects that we manage at the district level, so those large projects. So it's been large the last couple years. You'll see before it was only $560,000, then it jumped up because we're working on projects like the Columbia Basin Student Home Builders, developing that second subdivision. We've been doing major roof repairs. So while those things, hopefully we're caught up and we can continue to do those as they arise, but we'll be looking to our reserve funds. So we have a maintenance reserve that we would utilize if we have a roof repair that's needed or something of that nature. Other staff services, we reduced a placeholder that was in there for the mentor-teacher program. That program is now administered through the ESD, so they actually reimburse the district for those programs. So we don't need it to be an expenditure in the general fund. In function 2669, that is our technology fund. So we know that technology purchases will have to use a reserve fund. We'll be able to support some of the purchases through the general fund, but we also have E-rate dollars. We have other technology reserves that can be utilized for computer rotations as needed. On page 5, very similar to the maintenance reserve or maintenance funds being reduced, the 4120 and 4150 are also large construction projects. We would typically think of bond type projects, something that would be bondable, we would record here. We had that placeholder for the last 2 years, not seeing it necessary going forward at this point. But again, we do have reserve funds if there is a major repair needed at a building. And then the reserve funds, the transfer out of the general fund into other reserve funds is going down because we're only transferring to the print shop and outdoor school has been supported with a state grant the last couple years, so we really don't expect to have to transfer very much, if any at all, to the outdoor school program for next year. So. And that is our summary of the general fund. We can talk about the reserve funds if you'd like, if you have questions, if you want to look through them, and then we can talk about them. I will point to, on page 20, under the debt services, Fund 300 debt services, you'll see the proposed budget is going from $4.2 million to $36.1 million. That is our balloon payment for our bond debt. So not the most recent bond, but the bond prior, the 08 bond. The Q-SCAB bond debt had one maturity date. So for the last 5 years, we've been setting funds aside with the intention of paying the full amount in June of 2026. So we'll see that balloon payment of $36 million, but you'll also see the unappropriated ending fund balance go down from $27 million to $500,000. And that $500,000 is more in line with what we have had historically as our ending fund balance for our debt service account. And then obviously our, in Fund 400 is our bond construction account. We're just using up the remaining funds. As of right now, we have about $5.9 million, but we are working on projects. So actually, by the time we get to July, we probably won't have the $5.9 million left. But again, we can only spend the amount that we have budgeted. So if for some reason we had a really good interest earnings for the month of June, if we hadn't budgeted a little bit extra for next year, we wouldn't be able to spend those without going back to the board for additional authorization. So we budget a little bit high in those areas just to make sure we can fully spend those funds out. Are we ready to move on to the tax rate information, or do we want to look through the reserve funds anymore? Oh, did I jump over that?
On 205, on the food service section, is a lot of that reimbursed back?
I'm sorry, say that again.
On 205 for food service, where, we traditionally had like 2.4, 2.6, now, 6.25, that has to do with, is a lot of that reimbursed, or is that part of that Title I?
No, so this is the federal food service program, so then it is the child nutrition program. So we report that to the state, and now because we are CEP, so all of our children eat for free, our reimbursement rates have gone significantly up from where they were in the past, so that's why we see that jump there.
And so that's a line item that we get a lot reimbursed, and then the other one is on that 2550 in the general fund. That's that student transportation, and that's reimbursed at what, like 80% or something?
70%.
70%? A little excited.
And so the transportation grant is built into the state school fund. So again, it's based off of all of our estimates and then reconciled this following spring. I think we'll do public comment after the tax rate.
You got to stick to the, we're blown by the time. So
Oh, yeah. Sorry.
I failed as my board chair. I should have grabbed the gavel and said it too.
So for our tax rate calculations, the general fund tax rate is fairly easy because we have a permanent tax rate. Our permanent tax rate is 4.877. 4.8877, yeah, got all the digits in there, per 1,000 of assessed value. So that was enacted with Measure 5 and Measure 50. So for our general fund, we're just going to assess that, and then the county will determine how much we actually earn or how much we receive in tax turnovers based on that rate. The district typically collects about 95% of that levy in the first year, and then slowly thereafter more trickles in or is written off at the county level. But we use that 95% as our average collection rate. The one that gets a little more tricky is our debt service fund, because we have to tell the county how much money we need, and then the county then assesses or calculates what that dollar assessed rate is. And the difference is that we do it this way because the bond holders have already told us how much we owe them, and they don't really care if we didn't collect enough money. They still want to be paid, right? So we're going to tell the county the dollar amount that we need. The county will then calculate what the rate is based on the total assessed value. And the debt service rate is outside of compression. So if you were to compare your tax statement to your neighbors, it is possible that you pay a different rate for the general fund than your neighbor does. And because of compression looks at the assessed value compared to real market value. And so when we assess tax rates, we assess it on assessed value, but the compression looks at market value or real market value. So all of those differences, and depending on if your house is sold recently or if they've done a recent appraisal of it. But when you compare those same tax statements and look down under the debt service, every single person in the county, or in our taxing district, not the county, in our taxing district will pay the same per thousand rate for the bond, but it may be a different rate under the general fund. And that's when you look at your tax statement, you'll see Hermiston School District up at the top under the general, and then again under the bonds near the bottom. So for the coming year, we know we have debt service payments coming due of $36.12 million. But we also know that we have about almost $27 million already in our reserve funds because the last 5 years we've been setting funds aside. And that was built into the bond question and the bond sale documents. So that's not something that myself or Tricia decided that we were going to do. That was how it was planned all along through the bond sale. So we're going to subtract that amount off. Then we know that those investments are still earning interest, and we're going to receive other income from the heavy equipment rental tax. That's not a very large income. It's about $25,000 a year. But the big piece of that is interest from our investments. But then we also need to take into account that we're not going to collect 100% of the amount in the first year, right? So if we need $1 million for our bond payments, if we were to tell the county we need $1 million, at the end of the year, we're not going to have $1 million to pay all of our payments. So we have to gross that up about 5% to make sure that we actually have enough cash on hand to pay those debt service bills when they come due in December and June. So when we take all that into account, we're looking at a levy amount of just over $9 million. When we built our tax projections with our bond sales, we used about 2.75% assessed value growth each year, and we matched the assessed value growth with the levy amount growth. So if all goes as planned, if the assessed value grows at that 2.75, taxpayers will see no rate increase for the bond rate. However, that doesn't mean their taxes aren't going up, because each year, obviously, the assessed value goes up each year. And the county is going around doing appraisals right now also, so it may go up more than just the normal 3%, but the rate itself should stay either equal to or less than where it was this current year. Now, of course, I can't guarantee you that, because just a couple of years ago, we had a major fire at one of our highest paying taxpayers. So if something like that happens, obviously it affects all of us as our property values, because districts, we have to have the amount to pay our bonds. But barring any of those events happening, we should be right in line with where our bond projections were when we sold them in early 2020. Any questions on the assessed tax rates? Okay. All right, and now it is public comment period. Was there electronic?
There were no comments submitted electronically.
And there's no one here in the audience to provide public comment, so I think we can move right past that, and then we can either have more discussion as a committee, or whenever the committee is ready, if you are ready this evening, to make a motion to approve the proposed budget and those proposed tax levy amounts.
Everybody has one of these.
Yes, everybody should have a pink piece of paper that has the same wording as what's shown up on the screen to make it a little easier.
be discussion, so I move the Hermiston School District Budget Committee approve the budget for the 2025-26 fiscal year in the amount of $187,623,481 with the permanent tax rate of 4.8877 per 1,000 of assessed value for operating purposes in the general fund in the amount of $9,035,500 for payment of the bond principal and interest in the debt service fund.
Second.
Want to read that one more time with the microphone?
Let me try the pink one and see if it's any different.
Okay. It has been moved and seconded for the Budget Committee to approve the proposed budget as presented. What Dave said, is there any further discussion? Okay, seeing no discussion, all in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Budget is approved.
Okay, we do have one more action item that we need to do, and that is to grant the Board of Education the authority to approve the Budget Committee meeting minutes from this meeting at their June meeting. So in the past, we had been holding on to the meeting minutes until the whole next year, and we received guidance from OSBA that really we should be trying to get these approved as quickly as possible so that they become official once they're approved and adopted. So this authorization is just authorizing the budget or the board to approve those meeting minutes.
Okay, would someone like to make a motion?
I move that the Budget Committee authorize the Board of Education to approve the May 19th, 2025 Budget Committee meeting minutes at their next regular meeting of the Board of Education scheduled for June 9th, 2025.
A second?
Second.
Okay, moved and seconded for authorization for board approval to approve the minutes. All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
All opposed? Motion passes.
And that is all I have. You're welcome to discuss it more if you'd like, but at this point, your duties as the Budget Committee are now at recess until next year.
So I probably say this every year too, but I can't remember one year to the next, James. So, but things I do remember is when Katie was here under Wade, and Wade would go through this, and then when Wade left, I remember Katie the first time she did it to where she is now, and this is you as well, Tricia, do a great job. But Katie, I just think you did a fantastic job, and every year it gets better, the explanation, and it makes it easier for us to understand. So thank you. So.
Agree, having sat through a few of these.
Right.
And congratulations again on another, what's this, 18th year of?
It is.
So that's great. So, if there's anything else, we'll recess for 4:25 school year.
Thank you, Mr. Harris. You have the gavel.
Here we go. Except we're behind schedule by 8 minutes.
Sorry. There's always that one guy that asks questions. Thank you so much.
Oh, you're welcome. Do you want these back? I made notes all over it, but.